2023 has been a strange year. It's had its ups and downs like every other year, but what's most strange to me is that in terms of video games, this year has been surprisingly consistently good. At least for me. I've played some amazing new releases, I've played some banging classics, and I've also had the chance to replay some brilliant games. So I figured to give you lot an idea of the games I'm into, my likes and dislikes and general preferences across the medium, and to replace the series of tweets I used to put out at the end of each year, summarising the games I played in that year, which I decided to stop doing because this year the list is far too long for me to feasibly do that, with me being on PC and PlayStation. I decided to do a cheeky tier list. Place each game that I played this year in a certain spot depending on how I felt about the game, and then just talk about it. Talk about why I put it where I put it, and just give my general thoughts on each game. So join me, Reece, not Reece, as I rank the games I played in 2023. Alright, so I've got the tier list up here, and starting from the bottom all the way at F tier, we've got Sonic Heroes. I've heard a lot about the Sonic games over the years. Sonic Adventure 2, best thing since sliced bread. Shadow the Hedgehog, way too cringy and edgy. Sonic Heroes, I never heard too much about. I always assumed it was sort of a midpoint between Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog. Inoffensive, and sometimes even good, but nothing too special. I assumed wrong. While I would switch out characters as needed, I tried to spend most of the game blasting through each level as the speed character, typically portrayed as the party leader, and in terms of the first story, is the titular character of the game, Sonic the Hedgehog, the character you want to be playing as in your Sonic game. Now, unfortunately, I found the speed style of gameplay to be the worst in the game. In speed formation, you would slip and slide across the level, and you had very little control over where you were turning and how fast you were going, with the characters taking forever to slow down once you let go of the stick. Now, this wouldn't be too much of a problem if the level design wasn't just hallways with death drops on either side, but unfortunately that is usually the case, and with such inaccurate, uncontrollable controls, you cannot have the level design be so risky. It doesn't meld together, it didn't really work for me. To touch on some positives real quick, I actually enjoyed the first few stages of each story, and the other two gameplay styles of Power and Flight honestly weren't too bad. Flight is a bit weird still, but it's certainly not the worst, and Power Formation, despite being a bit too slow for my liking, honestly it feels like I have the most control over my character, and the melee, while a bit basic, was quite fun. I think if it was slightly faster, I would just stick with Power Formation throughout most of the game. Overall, Sonic Heroes roped me in with some brilliant level design in the beginning, and completely shattered my dreams with some god-awful level design later on, as well as some pretty bad bosses. F tier. Moving on to E tier, we've got Sonic Adventure 2. Now, with this game, my issue lies mostly with the gameplay. For some reason on the PC version, the controls are super sensitive, and that once again leads to the feeling of having very little control over your character when you're playing as Sonic or Shadow. And that's before I even mention the mech stages, which are just terrible in every single way. And the treasure hunting stages, which for some reason are significantly worse than their Sonic Adventure 1 counterparts, which I thought were fine. The maps are much larger, you can only track one emerald at a time, and due to the maps being bigger, you have to rely on hints and clues in order to find each emerald, and this becomes a problem in the later stages where you need to rely on these hints that you can only view once in these massive maps. I don't know why they decided to make some of these changes, but it overall just makes for a worse experience. Once again, touching on some positives real quick, the story is actually pretty interesting for a Sonic game, and I have no issue with the level design of the speed stages. It is just those sensitive controls and the other two styles of gameplay that bring the whole thing down for me. E tier. Now, this is the bit that kind of worries me. Holding Sonic in a generally low regard I feel like is fairly inoffensive, kind of a lukewarm take, but preferring Shadow the Hedgehog over any Sonic game? I feel like that's gonna get people questioning my opinion. I feel like that's gonna get people a bit mad. But hold on, let me explain why I feel the way I feel. This game addresses pretty much all of the issues I had with both Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Heroes. The sensitive controls are pretty much gone. I never feel like I'm out of control with nowhere to course correct, and I never feel like I'm going so fast that any sudden movements will knock me off the edge of the map. Major gameplay elements such as the homing attack and wall run, both of which I felt were very inaccurate and unpredictable in Sonic Heroes, have been greatly improved upon. 9 times out of 10 when I execute these actions in Shadow, I come out on the other side with the intended result. And if I don't, it's usually because of an error I've made rather than just a miscalculation on the game's part. Just to wrap up the positives here, I also feel like the level design has been greatly improved upon. I feel like it complements the gameplay mechanics better, and overall it just feels like it's easier to establish a flow and keep your momentum going from start to finish. It's super fun going through these levels. But speaking of going through these levels, I really didn't enjoy having to beat all 10 routes in order to access the true ending. I feel like one canon route should have been established, with the other routes just being an added piece of content if you wanted more gameplay, especially since some of the objectives in a lot of the routes are kind of nonsense. I don't want to collect 400 rings for Tails. No thank you. And honestly, calling it 10 routes is kind of generous because it's really just 5 routes with 2 different endings for each. That wasn't fun either. The tedium, paired with some of the bosses, especially the final one, being a bit of a slog with their massive health bars that you can only chip away at, just really brought this game down for me overall. I'm sorry Shadow, but it's off to the lower D tier with you. Now, just above Shadow and upper D tier, we've got EVE Online. I went into this game really not expecting much. I don't have a whole lot of experience with MMOs. I played a tiny bit of Elder Scrolls Online when that first came out, and even then I was just playing it on console and treating it as an extension of Skyrim, so I really don't count that. But I came out of EVE Online actually really enjoying it. Even now I come back to the game just to head out, mine some ore, come back, reprocess that ore, and then see where and how much it's selling for on the market. I'll then head out to that station and sell it for a profit. It's super relaxing. The perfect game for me to just maybe not even wear my headphones, maybe just whack a podcast on my phone and just chill out for a bit. I also love how it genuinely feels like there are endless possibilities in the world. When it comes to EVE, I'm pretty casual, so I'm perfectly fine with hopping in every now and then, doing a little bit of mining, selling for a little bit of profit, but I can absolutely see the appeal in heavily speccing into combat, going out, fighting some wars, and looting the spoils from that. And I'm sure I'm only just scratching the surface of what's possible in the game. I thoroughly enjoyed this game. Upper D tier. Moving on to lower C tier, we've got Little Nightmares: Secrets of the Maw. Now, I played through the main game of Little Nightmares late last year, after it came out for free on PS Plus I think, and I really enjoyed it. I don't honestly have too much positive or negative to say about it. It was just a really solid puzzle platformer, just oozing with atmosphere. And the Secrets of the Maw DLC is just more of that. I'm really excited to eventually hop into Little Nightmares 2 and maybe even Little Nightmares 3 whenever that comes out. Solid game. Lower C tier. Just in case anyone notices, I decided to change the shirt because the previous one was a Christmas t-shirt, and the graphic on it was rubbing against the wire, and the recording I was noticing was picking it up. Yeah, so I've decided to change it for the rest of the video. I'm really hoping I can salvage the first half. I guess we'll know if I was able to, because the video will be out. Anyway, in upper C tier, we've got Sea of Thieves. I played this game a lot back when it first came out in 2018, and I've got such fond memories of the first few events, like the Hungering Deep, which introduced the Megalodons, and the Skeleton Thrones. I remember that being quite cool to take part in, as well as the first big expansion, the Forsaken Shores, which added the new map location. But shortly after that, I sort of fell out of love with the game. It just sort of bored me, and I remember there being a big problem with players just attacking you for little to no reason. Really, if you saw a ship on the horizon, it was best to just leave then and there if you weren't into combat, because they would just chase you down. Oh, hello. No thank you, goodbye. See in a bit, mate. No, I'm alright. I'd rather not. No, I don't want your car insurance, please. Leave me alone. I have booty and plunder for you not to take. Please, someone help me, I feel fear. I'm a scared boy. Mummy. Have you heard of our Lord and Saviour, Spectral Division? Please, sir, I would like to take a minute of your time to talk about your mum. From what I've experienced, things are a lot calmer these days. There's a lot to be getting on with, whether you're on your own, as part of a crew, or even as part of an alliance, and players seem to be generally more interested in keeping themselves to themselves and not bothering anyone else. I specifically remember being one island over from an active fort that was being done by a galleon, and they didn't come over to see what I was up to or make sure I couldn't interrupt them. It was really nice. I've also found the base gameplay loop to be much more fun than it ever was when I was first playing. There's a bunch of new world events, you can find random quests on beaches, and there's even a few new weather effects like fog that I don't think were there when I was first playing. These all come together to make each voyage unique, and I really enjoy that. Overall, the game is really fun these days. I've had such a blast being able to finally hop back into the game after a few years of avoiding it and then not being able to play it because I was on PlayStation. Yeah, really fun game. Really, really fun. Upper C tier. And moving on, in B tier we've got God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. Now, to give some perspective on how I feel about God of War Ragnarok, in terms of the main game, enjoyed the beginning, I enjoyed the ending. It was just sort of the progression from the beginning and how we got to the ending that I didn't really enjoy, so I went into Valhalla skeptical, but overall ready to enjoy it. And I've got to say, they absolutely delivered with this lovely bit of free DLC. The gameplay loop is solid, and I'm no expert on roguelikes. I've never really played a roguelike game before, but if this is at all representative of what the genre is like, I'd say it's a decent enough introduction to it. I've also found that the combat has somehow been improved from the base game, where the base game would throw a bunch of enemies at you and you'd be surrounded and the whole system would just fall apart. Valhalla doesn't do that, and it just makes for a better overall experience. Also, and I won't go into specifics because it's spoilers, but the story boss fights in Valhalla are honestly really, really fun. I think outside of the first Thor boss fight from the main game, these boss fights have offered the best balance between balance, fun, and decent challenge in this game as a whole, and I just really had fun with them. Finally, and again, no specifics, the story element of Valhalla serves as a lovely epilogue to Ragnarok and a brilliant rounding out of the Norse duology as a whole, to me at least. I think the story, combined with the gameplay and how that's utilised in this roguelike mode, makes this DLC more than deserving of B tier. Next up we've got Slender the Arrival. Now, I first played this game back when it first came out on consoles, but recently they added a Unreal Engine 5 update that completely overhauled the graphics of the game, and they also added a bunch of minor additions that sort of add to the atmosphere, such as in the Into the Abyss level where you're stuck in the mines with the chaser. They've added footsteps to that character, so now it feels like she's actually wandering the mines in search of you instead of just sort of appearing out of nowhere. And as someone who has a very specific fear of being stuck in an enclosed space with a creature that is just constantly chasing you, oh, it adds to it. It makes it even more scarier than it already was, and it was already petrifying. I also really liked the new story chapter they added as part of the update. While maybe a little too overt and obvious in places, it only added to the mystery and intrigue of this already really complex Slender story. Overall, as someone who's loved this game since the day it came out all the way back in 2013, I really enjoyed this update. I think it just adds on to the already brilliant foundation that is the base game of Slender the Arrival, and I can't wait to see where they go next. Whether it's adding more story content to this game, or whether they're continuing the story in the next game, S Lost Chapters. I'm super excited, I can't wait for the future. Indie horror is back. Slender the Arrival. Beat it. Valheim is next up on the list. I was roped into playing this game by my good buddy or pal Spectral Division, and I really enjoyed it. It's a really cool survival game with some super solid mechanics. Myself, him, and our mate Andrew played about 100 in-game days of it, for no particular reason. And in that time we were able to beat the third boss of the game and build up a really cool looking base. There's so much more we need to see and do, and I'm really excited to eventually be hopping back into it with them. Valheim, you know what, you go and beat it. Next up we've got Mirror's Edge. Now, this is a game I absolutely adore. I love the atmosphere, the gameplay, of course, how weighty the character feels. You really feel like just a regular person running around doing parkour. But unfortunately my experience of this game was heavily soured by having to play it on PC and also trying to stream it on PC. There is no windowed mode, and tabbing out of the game will just cause it to crash, so I was forced to download a windowed mode mod, which unfortunately didn't let me play on controller, so I was forced to quickly learn how to play it on mouse and keyboard, and I really didn't enjoy playing it that way. I don't know what it was, I just couldn't quite get the hang of it. And by the end of the game I was really frustrated and I just wanted to get it done. But of course none of that takes away from just how brilliant this game is. It's got super solid, consistent parkour gameplay, which to this day no other game has really been able to come close to, and the world, the art style, it's just so unique. It doesn't rely on looking photorealistic, and I think because of that, it will never truly die. Mirror's Edge is a timeless classic, and I will always enjoy coming back to it for a bit of fun. Beat it. Eternights is next up on the list, and I was heavily invested in this game from the moment it was announced. The first trailer showed elements that I was already familiar with from playing the Persona games, and the developer was quick to go on Reddit after it was announced, just to clarify, why yes, I am a Persona fan, how could you tell? Throughout development, the dev was constantly reminding us that yes, this game is heavily inspired by Persona, with its social sim and calendar mechanics. It does both very well in practice, but because it is derivative of an already established idea, I think it isn't quite as deep or meaningful or interesting as the original. It's not going to leave you thinking, questioning, or re-evaluating quite as long as you would be if you just played a Persona game. But it's got charm, it's got heart, and it's got a brilliant cast of characters that you will absolutely fall in love with by the end. You may have also noticed that I've just been saying dev, or developer, singular, throughout this section, and that's not a mistake. This game was developed by one person, and as a game in general, but as a game that was developed by one person, it's a super solid start. It's a really brilliant game, and now that they've announced they've got funding for a proper studio, I'm super excited to see where they're going next. Overall, Eternights, really good first game. Beat it. I'm going to talk about Coffee Talk 1 and 2 as part of the same section because I have very similar thoughts on both. But these games are really good indie games. I thoroughly enjoy both of them. They have a really unique atmosphere set in a really interesting world that's really quite similar to our own in the problems, the social problems that they experience. but it's sort of magnified with all these different sort of races and species that are introduced in this sort of alternate reality Seattle. I think, as frustrating as it can be sometimes, trying to get the best ending, but not being able to figure out the right combination of ingredients to make the drink you need to make in order to progress the story in the best direction. The gameplay loop is super fun and, more than that, relaxing. You just make a drink and listen to people talk about their problems, and the social concepts and problems that they discuss as part of this game are interesting enough that no matter which ending you get, it's really interesting to just think about. But speaking of gameplay and frustration, Coffee Talk 2 adds a new mechanic in the items that you need to give to certain characters at certain times along with their drinks. And I haven't 100% of the game yet like I have with the first game, so I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it yet. Right now, I'm more inclined to say that it's just an added bit of tedium that wasn't really needed and just adds to the frustration while not really adding too much. Maybe I'll feel differently after I've actually 100% of the game, gotten the best ending, and known exactly how that sort of ties in and how much is sort of influenced by that mechanic. But with that being said, I still think it's quite an interesting mechanic, and it's good that they decided to sort of even slightly expand on the gameplay of this game, so it's not just a carbon copy of game 1, but with a different story. All in all, I love Coffee Talk 1 and 2. The gameplay is both engaging and relaxing, which I think is super impressive. The characters are really memorable, and it's a joy seeing them grow and change and develop over the course of the two games. Aqua and Myrtle have my whole heart, and the social issues and concepts that the characters touch upon are really interesting to think about in the context of this world that is both slightly different, but also all too similar to the world we live in. Really good games. B tier. Moving on to A tier, we've got Minecraft. Now, I don't have too much to say that hasn't already been said. I mean, it's Minecraft, for God's sake, but in terms of how I play the game, I would say I'm maybe slightly unique in that I'm much more into the exploration aspect than the building and molding the environment to my liking. And in the exploration aspect, the game has been greatly improved upon. The environments are much more natural looking, and there's more of them. And I have a blast just walking around the world and taking it all in. Like literally every Minecraft player out there, I'm not a fan of all the changes they've made in recent years. Especially for me, it's the combat that I take the most issue with. I much prefer how it worked back in the day where it was just spam to win. I don't think Minecraft ever needed difficult combat, but like most things, that's easily fixable with mods, and I'm very grateful to be on PC now, where I can just heavily mod the game. It's opened up a bunch of new possibilities to me, and I'm very eager to eventually hop into something like this stupidly heavily modded, and just really sink my teeth into that, and just see how just how different Minecraft can be playing on PC versus consoles. Yeah, Minecraft, timeless classic. It'll always be something I go back to, even if it is just either once in a while or whether I'm playing it consistently for a stream series, which I will get back to eventually. I promise. Sometime in the new year, we've got a wither to kill. We'll get there eventually. But yeah, Minecraft, brilliant game. A tier. Portal 1 and Portal 2, again, I think I'm just going to talk about them both in the same clip, just because, I mean, I love them both equally. There isn't anything that I dislike about the first game that's then addressed in the second game. But yeah, I love the gameplay in both, of course. You know, the thinking with portals, that's pretty cool. I've got nothing really to say on the gameplay. I mean, I'm sure it's all been said before. Everyone knows how just brilliant and fun and intuitive Portal gameplay is. I think what I most prefer in Portal 2 over Portal 1 is just how interesting the story can get, the world building. I really in particular love the bit where you fall all the way down to Old Aperture and you see the similarities in between the old and the new, and how New Aperture is literally built on top of Old Aperture. It's really interesting. It's got some super solid world building, and I minor spoiler, well, minor. Hmm. But spoilers ahead, but I really wish I had a face cam for this moment, because I've never truly been shocked by a reveal in a game before, and I really wish I'd been able to properly capture how this moment made me feel.
The testing area is just up ahead. The quicker you get through, the quicker you'll get your 60 bucks.
Got who?
Caroline, are the compensation vouchers ready?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson. Why did I just... Who is that? What the hell is going on here?
Yeah, I'm really glad I was able to play through this spoiler free. Yeah, overall, Portal 1 and 2, they're classics. They're never gonna age, I don't think. People will always love them, people will always come back to them. I eventually want to go back to Portal 2 and do the co-op maps, whether I do them, I believe you can play them on your own, just with the second character being sort of AI controlled. But yeah, no, overall, these games are super, super fun. I really love them, for the world building especially. It's super interesting to think about, and yeah, um, yeah, I have nothing else to say. Portal games, good games. A tier. Sonic Adventure DX, one of the only Sonic games I played before starting my big Sonic Saturday series. I played this game a lot as a child. I never beat it because I could never figure out how to beat the big stages. The gameplay, the way the characters control is super solid and consistent. I never feel like I'm going too fast or too out of control with any of them. And all the characters controlling similarly, again, while it might be a bit boring to some, to me I think it works in its favour, especially when compared with what we got in Sonic Adventure 2. The level design is brilliant for the most part. I can't really think of any instance where I disliked how a level was structured or thought it was really counterintuitive. And of course the soundtrack is brilliant. I in particular really love the Skydeck soundtrack, and I remember when I first got to it in the stream series, and the memories just all came flooding back, and I instantly I recognized it. It was brilliant. Overall, while yes, I do have nostalgic value for this game, and I'm fully prepared to admit that, I genuinely believe that it's the best of all the Sonic games I've played so far. It's just such a shame that none of the future games were able to live up to just how good Sonic Adventure 1 was. Timeless classic. A tier. And at the tippy top of A tier, we've got Insomniac's Spider-Man 2. Now, this game improves upon the first two in a lot of ways, especially in the swinging and the just general traversal of the world. I feel, unless you have a particular itch to jump off the Chrysler building, there's no real need to go back to either of the first two games. This game, in terms of swinging, is much better than the first two in every single way, especially with swinging assistance set at 0. I've had a lot of frustration with this mode, but also a lot of really cool, satisfying moments. There's a lot to be improved upon, for sure, but overall, the traversal is some of the best I've ever seen in any video game ever. It's so fun. I still find myself coming back to it every now and then if I just fancy a nice old swing around New York. It's really fun, really engaging, and honestly kind of hypnotizing. I found myself staying up stupidly late, just swinging around New York. The combat as well, I feel, is more balanced than either of the first two games were. You now only have 4 gadgets instead of the 8 in the first game, and the 4 in the second game, though I never really used the gadgets in Miles Morales, unfortunately. But I feel that there's maybe a fun factor that's lost with having so few gadgets only being tied to button presses, as opposed to a lot of gadgets in a wheel. And I'm not entirely sure which I prefer. I feel like if maybe you had the option to swap out the gadgets you have, and you were given access to the entire roster, or maybe if Peter and Miles had access to a similar set of gadgets, with Peter's being more geared for stealth because he's not really got many stealth abilities, whereas Miles having more tools geared for combat because he's fully kitted out in stealth with his invisibility. I think maybe that would be a bit better, but I'm not entirely sure. I like both for different reasons. And the story, I feel, unfortunately overall, is worse than the first two games. I feel Act 1 is pretty much perfect. There's a brilliant intro to sort of the stakes with Craven being introduced, and it sort of like introduces us to Peter and Miles' problems and what they're going to be dealing with throughout the game really well. I feel like the bit where the game starts to sort of go downhill is when Peter gets the black suit. I feel it's kind of starting to get a bit rushed from there on out. But where the game sort of really falls apart for me is Act 3, when Venom's out and about in the city. I feel like he's there for a very, very limited amount of time, and it sort of goes from, oh, Venom's just here, to, oh, the world is ending in the space of like 2 minutes. And I don't know, it's not a very big build up, it's very sudden, and I feel like if the game had been an extra 5-10 hours longer, it definitely could have been improved upon a lot, just in terms of the pacing and just how rushed the story felt overall. The next game will need to be longer, as opposed to it being the same length as the first game, which when I heard about that, when I heard about Spider-Man 2 being a similar length to Spider-Man 1, yeah, I was worried. I thought that seemed like too short a time, and I feel like this is one of the only instances where I feel a game is too short. That's a rare occurrence these days, but yeah, I definitely feel it here. This game should have been longer. The next game needs to be longer, definitely. Overall, yeah, as I say, for general gameplay, there's no reason for me to go back to either of the first games, but overall, as a complete product, I think I still prefer Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales over Spider-Man 2. But still a super solid game, one of the best games I've played this year. Yeah, top 8 here. Now, just to give a quick bit of context as to my history with Spider-Man, I have none. My first big sort of introduction was the Insomniac games. Spider-Man 1, I feel, is a brilliant origin story, without being, you know, the origin story. It molds Peter Parker from the Spider-Man we know already from the films and comics or whatever, into this quite unique version of Peter that we now know in the Insomniac games. It sort of helps redefine who Spider-Man is, I feel, and it's a brilliant story overall, with some great villains, great moments, especially with Peter and Miles, Spider-Man and Miles, and yeah, it's a brilliant setup for the future. I feel, in terms of story, it's, yeah, just super solid. Everything, and this might be because I've played the game twice now, but every moment feels intentional. There's nothing that feels accidental, there's nothing that feels rushed especially. Everything feels like it has a purpose and a place, and it feels like it was placed in the right place in terms of the plot points. And yeah, no, just overall, the story is just on its own. I feel it's basically perfect. I don't really have anything to criticize in terms of the story. It's just really solid. But yeah, overall, Spider-Man 1, a brilliant game, pretty much perfect in most ways, and yeah, a super solid first entry into what's turning out to be a pretty amazing series of games. lower S tier. Next up, we've got Spider-Man Miles Morales, and there are things I preferred over the first game, there are things I disliked over the first game, but overall, I think I prefer this over Spider-Man 1. My opinion sort of changes whenever I think about it. Even now I'm thinking, oh, maybe now I've talked about Spider-Man 1, maybe I prefer that over this, but no, I'm gonna stick with my guns for now and just say that I prefer Miles Morales over Spider-Man 1. I much prefer the more enclosed sort of personal journey for Miles, like leaning into and like accepting his unique identity as Spider-Man. I think that is a brilliant sort of redefining who Spider-Man is when a Spider-Man already exists. I feel it's, yeah, a beautiful story. Again, I've never read any comics, so that this story's probably been done before, but yeah, no, this is my first time experiencing anything like this, and it was beautiful to see. The gameplay also quite heavily improved from the first game. As I mentioned, you've got full stealth and bases in this one. The new abilities are pretty cool, they're really fun to sort of build up and use. The swinging, of course, is greatly improved over the first game, with it feeling like you carry your momentum a bit more than in the first game, and of course the animations, especially with the tricks, sort of flow into each other a whole lot better than they did in the first game. And yeah, like as I said with Spider-Man 2, before Spider-Man 2 came out, there was no reason for me to go back to Spider-Man 1 unless I wanted to, jump off the Chrysler building or play in a snowless New York. To touch on some criticisms real quick, I think the cast of villains in this game did have one weak link in the guy that runs Roxxon. You have enough motivation to sort of want to get him, but I feel he's quite one-dimensional. He doesn't have where Norman Osborn, even he had some complexity in, the whole thing with his son. I feel this guy, who I can't even remember the name of, Mr. Roxxon, I guess, I feel he was very sort of evil for the sake of being evil. But even then, don't get me wrong, you're very motivated to sort of get at him. Like over the game, you know what he's doing is wrong, and it doesn't feel silly. He doesn't feel like a silly villain. He just doesn't feel like a very complex villain either. Nothing like a Norman Osborn or a Doc Ock or a Martin Lee from the first game. And I think I briefly touched on this earlier, but the gadgets in Miles Morales, honestly, I don't feel either way about them. I don't really care for them. The only one I really used a lot was the remote mine that the Prowler gives you. But like other than that, I really didn't feel a need to use the spider droids or whatever the other two were. Yeah, just a really forgettable mechanic in Miles Morales. No thoughts. But yeah, with that being said, for the story and the gameplay improvements, I do overall think I prefer this game over Spider-Man 1. It's very close, and as I say, I'm constantly hopping between preferring one over the other, but right now, yeah, Miles Morales sort of just about wins over. S tier. Next up, getting towards the end here, we've got Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores. Now, I feel this DLC is a brilliant, a near enough perfect epilogue chapter to the main story of Forbidden West. The main story, of course, being all about Aloy sort of redefining who she is after sort of struggling with her identity and sort of trying to be Elizabeth Sobek, this woman who sort of loves the world but not the people in it. Aloy is trying to be like that, and sort of running away from her true nature. They absolutely could have left us just with that, with her coming to realise that and sort of accepting that and using that as a motivation to sort of move forward. But they decided to expand on that a little bit further with the Burning Shores DLC. The story, as it usually is with Horizon, I feel, is this DLC's strongest attribute. It's the perfect sort of conclusion to at least this first part of Aloy's sort of big redefining journey, which I'm sure they'll go even further with in Horizon 3, but I feel that after the journey Aloy went on, finding this one person that she truly cares about was the perfect way to go with the DLC. The one issue I have with the story aspect of Burning Shores is the ending. Now, no, not like that. I feel that the ending shouldn't have been an option. I went with the love heart option at the end, where Aloy accepts her feelings for Seika and reciprocates them, and really that's the only one that feels like the sort of natural conclusion to all the setup throughout the DLC, all the character interactions between Aloy and Seika. Yeah, that's the and especially in the context of the journey Aloy goes on in the main game of Forbidden West. Aloy finding this one person that she truly cares about and accepting that after accepting that she does care about people in the main game, that feels like the only place this journey can sort of end at. And I do worry that the other two options were added in as a last minute just in case, you know? If that isn't the case, and those two options were there since the planning stage, then, that's sure, whatever, that's fine. It just means my issue is on a more fundamental level. But if that's not the case, and they were sort of added in later, and I feel like they were, then it just means I have an issue with just how much influence fan reaction, or even potential fan reaction, can have on the artistic direction and the writing process at Guerrilla. My only other issue with Burning Shores is the map and the way it's designed. Now, there are no map markers in Burning Shores because there's no tall neck in Burning Shores. And that's a crime in its own right, don't get me wrong, but I think the issue is with the way the side content is structured. It's still structured the same way it is in Zero Dawn and Forbidden West, in that it's very checklisty. You find one thing and suddenly it's in your quest log. Find 10 things, 1 out of 10. Find 25 things, 1 out of 25. But with no way to mark that, with no way to check your checklist, it's very counterintuitive. It's not very fun, I feel, to be in a spot where, oh, I know there are more things like this, but I just can't find them. And that's not to mention just the fact that the Burning Shores isn't very fun to navigate, really, because of just the way it is. It's very sort of dangerous, sort of environmentally. You will just be flying around the whole time, not really looking for distinct locations. You really have to go out of your way to set your feet on the ground and just sort of run around. It's not very fun to explore. That's something I hope they sort of course correct on with the third game. I hope they don't lean into this weird amalgamation of Elden Ring open world design mixed with quite formulaic, checklist side content design. I hope they sort of go back on themselves and reintroduce sort of what they were best at when it came to the side content, because, and I'm stealing this quite directly, but the content at each location is much more interesting than actually getting to the location, I feel, when it comes to Horizon. Yeah, overall, Burning Shores, it's got its flaws. It's not quite as good as an overall product, I feel, as the Frozen Wilds from the first game, but in terms of its story, bloody incredible. S tier. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, my personal pick for Game of the Year this year. I didn't expect it. I really thought Spider-Man 2 was gonna take the cake at the last minute, but where Spider-Man 2 has its issues, and it's got things I overall prefer in its previous releases, Jedi Survivor I feel just improves upon every single aspect of the first game in every single way. The gameplay is just improved tenfold, especially with the traversal, which is honestly some of the most fun I've had with a traversal system in a game. The level design, with some areas being more open and some being sort of very Fallen Order and linear in that aspect, is super cool. Kobo especially, the sort of quote-unquote home planet, I feel is a brilliant example of like how these games can sort of continue to expand their level design and still keep it at a high quality. I do hope they sort of continue with this sort of level design, mixing it in with the more linear levels. And the story, of course, it just went above and beyond in my expectations. I didn't expect to be so invested coming out of Fallen Order, but yeah, no, there's really not a lot bad I can say about this game, and I'm just super excited to see where they go next. This is sort of one of the only current franchises that I'm really invested in. And yeah, no, Jedi Survivor, overall, it just blew me away. Absolutely. S tier, more than deserving. I cannot describe just how excited I was to get into Persona 4 Golden, finally, when it was re-released earlier this year. I believe I woke up at like 5, 6 in the morning with just how excited I was to play it, and even then, I don't think it was quite released yet here in the UK, but when I finally got into it and sat on that title screen, I knew I was in for yet another unforgettable experience. It's safely secured a spot alongside Persona 3 Fez and Persona 5 Royal as one of my favourite games of all time. I do not say that lightly. If you've played a Persona game before, you know what to expect when it comes to story, but in that aspect, it was bloody incredible. The cast of characters both inside and outside of your party are really lovable, and the sleepy town of Inaba is such a beautiful setting. It's gorgeous visually, and it's just a joy to be in. I think it's just under Tokyo from Persona 5 in just how much I love it. I think Tokyo wins me over with just how interactable it is, just how much you can do, how much you feel immersed in that world. But Inaba is definitely a close second for me, and that's before I even mentioned the unforgettable soundtrack that I still find myself coming back to from time to time. I think I don't think I can quite rank the soundtracks in the Persona games. They all sort of mean so much to me for different reasons. I love them all equally. Yeah, overall, Persona 4, a truly remarkable experience, and one that I will not forget anytime soon. And that's about it for the games I played this year. It's been super fun. As I said at the start of the video, it's been some amazing new releases, some brilliant classics, Not You, some spectacular replays. Overall, whether I enjoyed a particular game or not, I nonetheless just had a ton of fun with every single game. And I especially had fun, of course, with streaming, setting up my Twitch channel and getting going for the first time. I've wanted to do something like this for a while. I just love games, man. They're really fun. I feel like they're a brilliant storytelling medium, and if not that, they are just a brilliant source of fun. And I've been wanting to share my passion for that for a while. And I'm glad I sort of finally got a PC and sort of gave myself the confidence push to just sort of get going with it. I'm very glad I did that, and I'm very grateful for the minor success I've had in the very little time, relatively speaking, that I've been doing this. Of course, the streams themselves have been amazing. I've thoroughly enjoyed the few series that we've got going. The Minecraft series and the Sonic Saturday series, of course, being big highlights for me. And of course, I recently put out a video on Persona 3 Reload about why I think it needs the answer to be properly complete. If you haven't checked that out and you either have experienced Persona 3 or you don't mind spoilers, then please feel free to check it out. I worked really hard on it and I'm quite proud of the result, even if it is my first video, and of course looking back on it after months of working on it, I can sort of see improvements I could have made in my head. But as I say, it's a video I'm very proud of and I'm eager to put this one out and any other videos I feel like making in the future. Now, looking to the future real quick before I wrap up this year, of course we will be continuing the Minecraft and Mirror's Edge series, as well as Sonic Saturdays, which we're currently on Sonic 06, and I've actually been really enjoying that game. Apart from Mirror's Edge in particular, I want done before February, because we will be streaming Persona 3 Reload when that comes out. I feel I've done some and ahhing about it in my head, and I feel I have something to add to the conversation, being a big fan of Persona 3 Fez and the answer in particular. I'm, if nothing else, interested to see how much enjoyment I get out of a version of Persona 3 that doesn't have the answer. I'm very curious about that, so yeah, I'll be streaming my reaction to that, sort of my first sort of proper playthrough of it. And yeah, that'll be quite fun. And in terms of games I'm personally wanting to play just on my own, it's the day after Christmas as of recording this, and for the big day itself I got Death Stranding and Ghost of Tsushima to play through. I think I'm gonna, over the Christmas break, play through Death Stranding first, A, because it's got a confirmed sequel coming out, so I want to prioritise getting that done, and B, just because it seems to be the bigger game. I've heard reports of it being 50 hours, 80 odd hours, 120 hours, so yeah, I'm very excited to dip my toes into that, sort of see what all the fuss is about, see whether I also think it's just a walking simulator, and yeah, I suppose I'll get back to you on that, whether I address it in a video or just talk about it on streams. But yeah, I think that is about it for this video. I hope you all had a lovely Christmas, whether you celebrate it or not, and I'll hopefully see you in the new year, either here on the main channel for some curated content, or over on the Twitch channel, where we have a live discussion and generally just enjoy the medium that is video games. We have a lot of fun over there. Feel free to stop by. In any case, have a good rest of your day, have a good rest of your week. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you when I see you. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.